Hello everyone, I'm Suniti. On behalf of Enago and Kargar, I welcome you all to today's webinar on publishing in medicine, tips to avoid common pitfalls. So today we have with us Dr. Despina Sanadu and Paul Lavender who will give us tips to dodge common blunders that medical researchers make in publishing their research. Despina holds a PhD in molecular cytogenetics from the University of Cambridge and currently works as an associate professor at the medical school in the Department of Internal Medicine at the University of Athens. She is a renowned medical researcher and a well-published author with more than 80 publications and over 3,000 citations to her credit. She has also been associated with Harvard Medical School as a postdoctoral fellow and an instructor. Today, she will share with us the best practices for avoiding common errors in medical publishing and also give us valuable insights through her extensive experience in the field. Paul is a strategic competence lead of education and learning at Karger Publishers, a well-known biomedical publisher based in Basel, Switzerland, where he drives to create engaging and effective tools for authors learning how to publish their papers. He has over 8 years of experience as a medical writer and communication specialist with various academic and commercial institutions. He will share with us the publisher's perspective on how these common errors that researchers make while publishing. We welcome you both and thank you for conducting this webinar with us. Before I hand over the mic to Dr. Despina, I would like to give you all a brief introduction about Anago. We are the world's leading author service provider, and our author first, quality first approach ensures that our authors receive only the best quality output and excellent user experience at all times. This unrelenting focus on authors' needs means that we never compromise on our quality systems and processes at any cost. All our services are designed keeping in mind the author's needs. Anago Academy is our author training program that educates authors through a number of resources, including webinars like today's session, as well as live workshop sessions. We also have an e-learning platform for researchers called as Anago Learn and a one-on-one consultation platform too called as Anago Consult. The Anago promise guarantees that a manuscript edited by us will never be rejected on the basis of poor language. On a rare occasion, if a rejection occurs, we will take full responsibility of re-editing the paper for resubmission at no additional cost. Enago's comprehensive after-sales services will support you in every step of the way until your manuscript is published. They are designed to take care of every need from the time you receive our main services till you are published. Enago's research communication service is designed to help you effectively present your research data. So that's all about Enago. In case you have any queries or are interested in any of our services, please feel free to email to us at academy@enago.com. Now, without any further delay, I will now hand over the mic to Dr. Despina. Over to you, Despina.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good day. It's a pleasure to be with you today. In this presentation, I would like to share with you some key tips as to how to get your project kickstarted, organizing it, get the results, prepare and present them in an attractive fashion, get them in a strong manuscript, and have this successfully published in a journal of your choice. So why do clinicians publish? Their contribution is absolutely valuable, important, critical for the advancement not only of science, but also of public health. So it's this drive, their will, their desire of them to contribute both scientifically and for the general good, but also it's an important means of advancing their own career plans, their own careers. However, getting published can be a bumpy road, and there's challenges to be faced in several steps of the way, starting from the actual design of the study, getting everything set into place, obtaining the data, implementing the project, getting the analysis done, and once all the information is there, selecting the journal that would be best suited to this work and to their ambitions, their goals, preparing the manuscript in the right format in a way that will be attractive and have high chances of success, submitting it, and then dealing with the peer review process, which can be quite challenging itself at times. So let's look at the points step by step. The first and critical step is to set strong foundations right from the start. This means doing all you can to avoid criticism on the novelty of your project, doubts on the robustness of your study, avoid concerns about the ethics of your approach, and avoid questionable statistical analysis. I would like to take you through each one of these steps and elaborate a little because there's a lot to be said about each one of those components. Keeping in mind that novelty is what gets you started, the robustness of your study design is what creates a strong piece of work, a strong manuscript, and ethics is your shield against criticism that could be catastrophic if not addressed successfully right from the start. In regards to statistics, we all know the importance of the appropriate statistical analysis of your data, ensuring that you have the necessary power in your sample for your analysis, ensuring you set in place the right analytical approaches. If you are able to do the statistics yourself, that's great. If not, one of your team members, and if not one of your team members, then make sure that you have someone who's strong in statistics and knows what needs to be done for the specific scientific question that you're posing so that all your statistics are correctly in place. But let's look at things from the start. Avoiding criticism on the novelty of your project. Right from the beginning, you have to make sure that you're well aware of the latest developments in your field. Once you pinpoint the scientific question that you're interested at, that you want to address, perform an exhaustive literature search on the topic. Make sure that you know exactly what's going on in the field, that you're up to speed with the latest literature. Talk to experts in the field about the latest developments and trends, because sometimes developments are faster than the publications that are coming out. So by talking to experts and also by attending international conferences from the most prominent scientific societies in the field, you can make sure that you know exactly what's going on and ensure that the scientific question you're about to embark on addressing is cutting edge and will be appealing, will receive interest, will attract citations. Avoid doubts on the robustness of your study. It's very important that your study design fits well to the scientific questions that you have set in place. You need to ensure that you have a very specific, clearly stated, at least in your mind at the very beginning, scientific question. It needs to be very precise and very clear. Then you need to choose the most suitable experimental approach. How will you answer this question? Will it be clinical observation? Will it be experimental work? Will it be combination of the two? What experimental approaches? What population do you need if you're talking about a patient population or human population? What's the sample size that's necessary to answer this question effectively? If necessary, do a power analysis to ensure that you have the right population size. Make sure you have the right controls in place for the question you're trying to answer. Different populations, if necessary, individuals with different conditions. Make sure that your cohort is well balanced in terms of the parameters that you want to investigate. Often you will also find that it's very attracting to have included in your study multiple cohorts from multiple different populations. Sometimes this is difficult to achieve right from the start, but as your study progresses, you will find that replicating it in different populations increases the strength of the answer and the message you're trying to get through, and also increases the chances of your manuscript to be accepted in a strong journal. Also, once you have answers to your scientific question, it's important and very well received to include in your study a set of validation experiments. And depending on the procedures you followed in your work, this will determine the validation experiments that will be needed. If possible, functional experiments are also very well received because this literally takes your study all the way through to the end to reaching a final strong conclusion that you can prove at the functional level, leading to a clear message as to what the clinical significance of your work is and how this significance is achieved. Now, in terms of ethics concerns of your approach, the ethics requirements should absolutely be met right from the start, and you should set in place all the necessary paperwork, approvals, all the necessary steps, because the ethics of your study is the bare minimum that needs to be met before one goes on to evaluate the robustness of your study and the novelty. The ethics really is the bare minimum, absolutely has to be there in place. The ethics requirements may vary from hospital to hospital, institute to institute, or even country to country. So make sure that you're well aware of the regulations that apply in your specific situation, in your specific location, which boards you have to obtain approvals, which committees you have to obtain approvals from. And bear in mind that sometimes this can be a time-consuming process because it may involve considerable bureaucracy, and that ranges from country to country and place to place. Prepare the informed consents. If you need informed consents, they usually have to be submitted together with the application for an ethics approval, and make sure that you know and carefully follow the procedure for obtaining informed consent. There are specific steps that need to be ensured. Make sure everything is in place, because you may be required to show that at some stage in the process. Maybe not, but maybe yes. It's very important that everything is set in place. And carefully abide to the general and medical data protection regulations that apply where you are. These again may vary from country to country or hospital to hospital, but this is becoming an increasingly important and strictly regulated issue in Europe and the US. So make sure that you follow these rules, you protect your patient's anonymity, you follow all the steps and all the requirements that you set out in your ethics application. And once you have your study and you have successfully completed the sample collection and the data analysis, and you have all your work there ready to be written, there's a new bump on the road that needs to be faced, and this is putting it together in a great manuscript. So what should one avoid in order to achieve this goal, the goal of an attractive, highly likely to succeed manuscript? First of all, avoid the weak titles. You need a title that will be clear, strong, accurate. It will reflect the content of your manuscript, of your work. It will not exaggerate, it will not mislead, but it will also not be weak and easy to go by unnoticed. So choose very carefully the words in your title. Avoid a bad abstract. The abstract is the first thing that the editor and the reviewer will read. It needs to be comprehensive, to have all the key points, to be attractive, to demonstrate not only what has been done, the key points of what was achieved, and also have a clear message as to what the conclusion is from this work, what's the importance of this work, what does it have to contribute in its scientific field. Avoid confusing structures. Your manuscript should have a nice smooth flow, transitioning from one section to the other smoothly, so that the reader enjoys, understands every section, understands how your rationale moved from one step to the other, and how the results from each section come to complement the results of the previous one. So guide the reader through your manuscript by using the right words and the right structure. Avoid poor content. Ensure that the information you have there is sufficient, is clear, and sets out all the key points, starting from the rationale, why you set out to answer this scientific question, why you chose the specific approach, how you executed it, what you got as a result. Make sure that your content is rich, that a rich amount of experiments, convincing experiments, a rich amount of data are included. And of course, uh, as you'll see on the last point, when we're talking about high quality content, this doesn't mean only the text, but also the figures and the tables and the literature search in every section in your manuscript. Very important, avoid poor use of English. You may have a fantastic set of experiments, wonderful data, a really well-structured manuscript, and a very poor use of English, which will put off the editor and the reader and the reviewer and may do injustice to your manuscript in the end. So make sure that all these aspects are carefully um, attended to ensure that what's actually submitted is strong and competitive. There's also another list of catastrophic mistakes that one needs to refer to. These are rare but happen, and they can really be the catastrophic step in the whole process of your work. Don't forget to omit authors, individuals who have contributed to this work. Do not use honorary authorship. If someone has not worked on the project, they should not be on the author list. Do not duplicate publication. If you've published this work as part of or as such in another journal, never ever submit it again to a different journal as a duplicate publication, unless it has already been rejected from somewhere else. Never ever, ever fabricate data. This really is seen so unfavorably. It's very common practice when data has been fabricated for those scientists to lose their job, to be blacklisted, and to have very negative future prospects career-wise. Never ever fabricate and never ever falsify data. Same goes for image manipulation, which pretty much is data fabrication and falsification. Plagiarism is another major issue, sometimes done intentionally, sometimes unintentionally, but be aware that most journals use software that can immediately detect what text has been copied from where, even if this is as small as a sentence or as big as a paragraph or parts of the text. This is seen very unfavorably, even if you're plagiarizing previous publications of your own. Be careful not to do it, not even by accident. Non-disclosure of conflict of interest is also a major issue. Be careful to disclose any conflicts of interest that are there. Journals usually tend to ask for this in a specific section. Don't neglect it and don't present false information. So these are really catastrophic mistakes that you must absolutely never do. Be very careful. Beyond that, once you have your nice, strong manuscript prepared in great language, in great content, with attractive, accurate figures and tables, there comes the next bump in the road, choosing the right journal. And here are some tips, points to avoid. Avoid going only for high impact factor journals. Yes, having a high impact factor is important and will look great on your CV, but there's more to choosing a journal than the impact factor. Avoid underestimating your work and avoid grossly overestimating your work. Sometimes we're too shy to aim high, although it's worth it. It's worth taking the risk and it's worth aiming high. If you aim too high, though, by grossly overestimating what you have there in your manuscript, you're running the risk of going through an increased number of rejection cycles. So it's a fine balance between the two, and experience certainly helps you find the right balance between the two. Avoid journals with a different scope. It's best to try and choose journals that are very close or right into the field where your work belongs, where your overall work, but also specifically your manuscript work belongs. Avoid journals aimed at different target groups, because a different target group with different interests in terms of readers and readership will not have as high chances of reading and citing your work, and citations are equally important as impact factors. So make sure you choose a journal that's at the right level, that's along the same scope with your work, and targets a reader group that will be interested in your work, will want to find out what's going on with your research work, with your findings, and will want to cite what you've been doing. And also avoid predatory journals, and we'll talk a little more about that. Targeting the wrong journal has a number of unpleasant implications, and that includes unnecessary delay in the publication of your work, multiple rejections and resubmission cycles, and also the risk of getting scooped, because as time goes by, the chances of someone else completing a similar or the same type of work and submitting it elsewhere increases. So it's best right from the start to think carefully what would be a well-suited journal for your work, for your specific manuscript, and aim for that right from the beginning. So some key factors to consider while choosing the right journal for you: the quality of the journal as a whole, the journal's scope, and the journal's readership. Now, avoid predatory journals. This can cause delays and problems down the line. Some warning signs for detecting and being aware of predatory journals: they're often not transparent about publisher identity and location. They tend to boast an unofficial or bogus journal impact factor. They falsely claim to be indexed in PubMed. They tend to send spam emails soliciting submissions or editorial board membership. They promise acceptance within a very short period of time. They lack a named editor-in-chief, or they have a website riddled with grammatical errors and broken links. And they may end up publishing articles that have not been professionally typeset. Overall, predatory journals can be deceitful as to what they are, what their readership is, and could end up harming your long-term career goals and scientific goals. Now, once you've chosen the right journal for you and you go about starting the submission process, be careful of some key rules. Avoid the wrong type or the wrong size of manuscript. Be aware of the type of manuscripts that this journal allows, accepts, and pick the best suited one for you. Be careful of the size of your manuscript. There are usually very strict rules for each journal and for each type of manuscript. Avoid incorrect formatting. Sometimes people get carried away and forget to reformat their manuscript when submitting in a journal or when submitting to a second and a third journal upon rejection from the first and the second one. Make sure you reformat correctly. This is always seen favorably. Avoid mistakes in the letter to the editor. Your letter needs to be courteous, informative, brief and to the point, but also including all the key points. Make sure you don't have grammatical or spelling errors in there or mistakes in the content. It's often the case that you can see letters to the editors where they mention a different journal from the one they're submitting to, often because they reuse a letter that they submitted in a previous journal. So be very careful of your letter and following the journal's rules. When you get to receiving reviewer comments, make sure you address them with courtesy and increased care, and we will talk about that a little more in a minute. And never ever get disappointed about manuscript rejection. It happens to all. Let's look in some more detail these key points. First of all, in terms of avoiding the right type or size of manuscript, I'd like to share with you an example. For example, you want to publish a unique and striking clinical outcome of a disease. You need to consider what type of article can you publish based on that, and which journal should you aim at. Will it be a case study? Will it be a brief report? Will it be a long manuscript, a full manuscript? Will it be a letter to the editor? What will it be? In this specific question and example, keep in mind that specialized case report journals have 15 to 65% increased acceptance rate and faster review process than mainstream medical journals. The vast majority of case report journals, approximately 94%, are open access. However, they may have a small target group and low or no impact factor. So it depends on what your priorities are and where you want to see your manuscript published and what is your ultimate goal in order for you to choose what type of manuscript and what journal. Very, very important and challenging bump along the way is dealing with reviewer comments. So once you have submitted your work and it has been sent to reviewers, you will most likely get back a series of comments. They can range from very detailed, sometimes very harsh, sometimes very kind, but all in all, it's very important to keep in mind that these comments are there to help you improve your manuscript. Regardless of the language they're written in, they are there to help you make your paper stronger. So always be very courteous when replying to reviewers. They devoted the time to read through your manuscript, come up with ideas as to how to improve it. Try to address all their comments if possible. If needed, provide new explanations, clarifications, additional experiments, increase your cohort sizes, anything that's possible, try to address it. If you disagree with a comment provided by the reviewers, try to submit back to them as much information, literature, or data as possible to support your view, your different opinion. And in a very courteous fashion, try to explain why you have presented it, why you have performed your study in the specific way. Try to be clear as to why you would prefer for the specific point to remain as is. But again, do that in a courteous, open, and scientific fashion, providing all the data and all the information. Sometimes, even after having handled every bump of the way with the best possible means and the best possible intentions and the strongest efforts, sometimes your manuscript will still get rejected. And rejected is really part of the process. And I would dare say that rejections are far, far bigger in numbers than acceptances. Everyone's manuscripts are rejected sometimes or many times. And this should be viewed as an opportunity to learn and improve. We can learn from the reviewer comments, we can learn from the process and make our manuscript much stronger, much better, both this manuscript and future manuscripts. There are cases where a manuscript was rejected by an average impact factor journal, but later on accepted to a higher impact factor journal, or a journal of a more targeted readership that was then accepted by a journal with a broader audience. There's many success stories that had to go through a very hard, challenging time, bumpy road before they actually achieved their successful end. So rejection from one journal may be your opportunity to improve and proceed to publish in an even better one. Keep that in mind and never ever despair. So with all this information, I would like to thank you for your attention, wish you very good luck with your publication, pass the microphone on to our speaker, Paul Lavender.
So my name is Paul Lavender. I work for Carga Publishers. We are a Basel-based company, still a family business for the last 130 years, now run by the fourth generation Gabriella Carga, and on a day-to-day basis by our CEO Daniel Abnetter and our COO Andre Janssen. So we're a medium-sized company, about 250 employees, 100 journals, biomedical journals, about a quarter of which are open access, and around 10,000 available book titles. But I think the most important point for you is the data below that, that in 2018, we received about 19,000 manuscripts for publication. And of those 19,000 manuscripts, only 8,000 went on to be published with us. So the majority of manuscripts submitted to us, 11,000 in this case, were rejected. Now, Despina's explained very eloquently about the pain of rejection for an author, but I can also say as a publisher and as a managing editor, I really take no pleasure in sending rejection emails to authors. The authors, of course, feel hurt, and also as a publisher, we can invest a lot of time and effort in securing peer reviewers, in corresponding back and forth with authors, and at the end of it, we also have nothing to take into the journal that we can show to our readers. But nevertheless, we do reject the majority of papers. And why do we do this? Well, very simply, for the reasons already explained eloquently by Despina. This slide is a copy of the agenda and the points that she's gone through. And I can confirm 100% that those 11,000 papers were rejected for one or more of the reasons you see here. So in my own experience as a medical writer, submitting your paper can seem like quite a daunting experience. And I knew these points, but I didn't really know the process. It felt unknown or alien to me. I didn't know what happened once I'd click submit. So it felt a bit like this slide here. I felt like the scientist on the left of the screen with this paper, and there were these people, and some of them with masks and some with clubs and swords, standing between me and acceptance. And I had no idea really what they wanted and what I should do to stop them hitting me over the head with something or shooting me. So if you feel daunted by the publication process, this is entirely normal. I mean, I submitted maybe 15, 20 papers with work that I was writing for other people, so I wasn't so attached. And I was still really scared every time I clicked submit. I still double and triple checked everything. And what I'd like to do on this webinar is to demystify who those people are and what they're looking for. So you imagine you've clicked submit. Where does your paper go? Well, the first point of call is to an editorial office manager. What's an editorial office manager looking for? Generally, they're looking at the ethics, research and publication ethics, and whether you followed the manuscript submission guidelines. This is an initial pre-screening before it's even brought to the attention of a scientist. So as Despina's mentioned, research ethics, have you obtained ethical approval from an ethics committee, an institutional review board? And as she said, keep in mind, these approvals can change from country to country. So I was involved in one case where the authors were French. They didn't need ethics committee approval in France, but the journal, the target journal, was American, and the editor was insistent that they should have obtained ethics committee approval. So keep that in mind and obtain approvals before submission, before carrying out your study, of course. Publication ethics refers to plagiarism, and again, as Despina has pointed out, almost all publishers have software now that detects plagiarism. So I urge you to avoid any copy and paste, even of your own work. There are cases where, for example, you might want to reproduce a method section that you've already written, in which case reference the original section and, if necessary, obtain permission from the publisher who published it. And last but not least, carefully following the manuscript submission guidelines. At Cargo, we do try to make life easy for our authors. Most of our journals do not have very hard guidelines. Again, in my experience, the most severe case I saw was a journal that forced me to rewrite an entire paper and make it paragraph by paragraph as they wanted it, with the right number of paragraphs per section. So they can be quite extreme. And the editorial office's job is to check that their editor only receives manuscripts that have passed this first wave of this first search. Is it not plagiarized? Ethics committees have been approved. Patient anonymity is ensured. Any clinical trials have been registered, and the submission guidelines of the journal have been followed. So if you pass those 3 points, it will be passed on to a senior editor of the journal. Now, what's the editor looking for? The editor is looking at these 2 points in red. The first, as Despina has mentioned, are we the right journal to publish this work? Is it of interest to our readership? Do we have editorial board members who are interested in this topic and could help give this a correct peer review? The other thing the senior editor will look at is, of course, your cover letter. And again, as Despina mentioned, the cover letter should say why your work is novel and why this journal is a good place to publish the work. Has the journal published any similar articles before? Does it refer to any work previously published in the journal? Why have you gone to them? And again, as she mentioned, do not copy and paste a letter, a cover letter that was meant for another journal. I promise these things will be spotted and it does not create a good impression. So let's say you've got through this stage. The editor's happy. What's the next step? Well, the next step is that the editor will send for peer review. Peer reviewers, most journals try to secure 3 to 4 peer reviews. Peer reviewers are made up of people normally either on the editorial board, people who are contacts of the editorial board, or by searching the wider literature for specialists who've published in your field recently and who have no obvious conflict of interest, like they don't work at the same university. Now, for the peer reviewers, they're looking for something different again. Here are the points that Despina mentioned as absolutely fundamental to get right. This is what the peer reviewers are looking for. First of all, she mentioned the novelty, a strong basis to know your literature. The peer reviewer may be the first person who sees the paper who's really an expert in your field, and they will know whether you've cited all the appropriate studies or not. They will also know if your work has been, the findings you're trying to show have already been published elsewhere and your work is redundant. They'll know if the study design is appropriate to answer your study question or not. They'll know if the technology you're using is perhaps out of date. They will know, or at least flag, if there are any doubts about the statistical validity of the work. And the peer reviewer, even more than perhaps the other stages, the good writing makes the difference. Here, the peer reviewer will read the paper in its entirety, and if the structure and the flow are not logical, if there's parts missing, like figures or tables, if the conclusions don't match the data, if the data doesn't match the research question, this is where it will be picked up in detail. So let's assume now the peer reviewers are satisfied. And it may be that peer reviewers make contradictory recommendations. This is not uncommon. Normally, peer reviewers will give a recommendation to accept a paper, to perform minor revisions to a paper. And normally this is the minor formatting, perhaps requests for additional references. They could ask for major revisions. These often involve extensive reworking of a section, maybe new data or perhaps a new data analysis, or they will recommend that a paper is rejected. And normally rejection comes from the points Despina mentioned, the 4 points on ethics, novelty, study robustness, and questionable statistics, where the data, if it was published, would be misleading or useless. They make their recommendations to the editor-in-chief, and the editor-in-chief has the final decision. So normally the editor will send back to the peer reviewers, and if the author implements any suggestions and submits a revised paper, often this paper will go back to the peer reviewers, and the peer reviewers will say that the author has addressed the comments satisfactorily or not. It's very important, exactly as Despina has said, to be very professional when responding to peer reviewers. I can say a thorough peer review on average takes about 4 hours to perform. And if you receive a thorough, clear peer review, then the first thing to do is thank the reviewer for spending 4 hours, very likely unpaid time from a busy schedule to help you. Sometimes there are unfair peer review comments. I've had in some of my papers, reviewers comment that I should have my English checked by a native speaker. And in those cases, and you just take a deep breath, maybe leave the comments for a day, come back and respond as I did. Thank you very much. It's been written by a native speaker. It's been checked by a professional copy editor. However, if you find any issues at all with the language, point them out and we'll correct them. And last but not least, again, as Despina said, the majority of manuscripts actually don't make publication. And it's possible that your paper will be rejected. If this is the case, I would firmly encourage you to look at the comments you've received and implement these before submitting to a new journal. One of the main reasons for that is you should not assume that just because you're submitting to a different journal with a different publisher, that the peer reviewers will be different. Most publishers now have a lot of tools to find the most appropriate peer reviewers for each paper. And I have often received comments from peer reviewers saying, I've reviewed this paper for another journal, I've made extensive comments, the authors haven't implemented these, recommend, reject. So those are really the key points. If you implement Despina's advice, I can promise you that your research will go on to be published and you will have the joy of receiving an email and a confirmation that your paper has been accepted. So thank you very much for your attention.